without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in England.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Happy New Year, everybody. The Premier League is back. We are here. It is myself, Gally, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Bickler. We are going to take you through a little bit of our Premier League show, a little Premier League roundup. We will talk about the big stories from this weekend. We'll preview a little bit of what we expect to see in the 2024-25 campaign, give you a little bit of our predictions, talk a little bit about some of the transfer business that has occurred, things we've liked, things we haven't. We'll touch on week one, and if there's time, well, there's always time to shit on the referees in England and talk a little bit about, once again, the unfortunateness of the VAR week in review, because the only thing we need to review are bad decisions. But before we get to that, what would be a Premier League show without some poor Premier League predictions? And to be totally honest, for those of you who follow us on YouTube, you would know that we did a 24-hour podcast last weekend, Saturday into Sunday. Because of that, we had to take Monday off because we did not realize how much work that was to sit in one place and talk like assholes for 24 straight hours. But we learned. We need practice. So we didn't get to give you our predictions. The good news is we shared our predictions on that show. The bad news is it stopped recording after 12 hours, and there is zero chance Paul and I remember all of the answers we gave in hour 24. So if we deviate and you saw the show, you're not allowed to call us out. But then again, you'd have to have one hell of a memory if you remember what I picked at that time, because I can't remember it, and, well, it's not recorded. So, Paul, let's get right at it. Let's start with your Premier League champion for 2024-25.
Premier League champion, I went with the team that I feel like is the best defensive team, and also the team that I think has the one or two for midfield. So I went with Arsenal. I think they clearly were strong last year. I think they continue to strengthen. I think they've got a young core, and I just like that side this year.
Yeah, it's funny. I took Arsenal. I do remember that because I remember getting a lot of shit for the pick from some of the folks in the prediction room. I will admit, a little bit throughout the week, I started to give my own head a little wobble, and I was like, dude, did you really not take City to win this bleeping league? Like, you know who they are. Yeah. Like, they just showed up at Chelsea, didn't play their most influential player, got a poor performance from De Bruyne, maybe their most talented player. The player of the year didn't even suit up or dress. Like, they're down two starting center backs, and their keeper literally looked like he thought he was in Saudi Arabia playing in front of 430 people. And they still beat a team that some people are picking to make the Champions League. So, God knows they're probably going to be 4 points back on December 31st, and then they're going to drop 1 point between now and the end of the season. Yeah. And they'll probably win a fifth title, but I couldn't do it either. So I'm going with Arsenal as well. I do think this City team has regressed a bit. I'm almost nervous that they've realized that they regressed, and now they have injuries on top of it, and the Oscar Bob kid's out. So they're just going to go out and be like, hey, you thought we regressed? Why don't we go buy Rodrigo? You. That's what I kind of expect to happen. I still don't know that it'll be enough, and that's the crazy part. I think Arsenal has made that much of a jump forward. I think they've strengthened year after year. So I have Arsenal 1. Homer pick coming out first and foremost. I have Liverpool finishing second. Again, the more I think about it, logically, that makes no goddamn sense, but I'm sticking with it because that's my pick. I'll round out. I have Man City third, and I do have Spurs finishing fourth. Would have much rather them get 3 points today at home against or 3 points today on the road against a newly promoted team and not 1. But I do believe in what Ange is doing there. I actually think they have a very dynamic, solid defense. I really like all 4 of their defenders, actually. I think their midfield is good, not great. I think it has a chance to get really good as Archie Gray starts to play, and the Birdvale kid, who I think has a chance to turn out to be one of like the signings of the year. Really high ceiling, low risk type signing. And I have to be honest, and we'll talk more about Solanke. He looked today like a guy who's just going to score goals in that system. My biggest question is Son almost being marginalized with a guy like Solanke and Madison? And I don't know that you want to do that to the best player, arguably in the Premier League outside of the Champions League. I don't even think that's arguable. Of teams in the Premier League not playing in the Champions League, I think Son Heung-min is the best player in the Premier League right now. And I'd probably say it's probably done that for a while now. Cole Palmer's on his way, but that's my top 4. Who do you have second, third, and fourth?
Listen, I want to preference this with saying I believe we did this 18 hours into the podcast, right? So I don't love these as much as I loved them then, but I do remember my top 4. I'm not going to change it, and I'm going to argue like I really, really believe this. I also had Liverpool too. I think everybody's in love with the fact that we're not conceding goals like we were. So like I think. Look, I think this is a talented squad, right? Like, I think Arne Slot really got a great squad here. It's a very, very different looking style. Even though it's offensive geared, it's just much more possession based. And I think that really he's got the ability to stabilize the squad. And if they can get goals consistently, I think the great thing about it is that we're not going to be playing from behind like we were for the majority of last year. So I go 2 here. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that I think we feel outside of Arsenal, a lot of teams are regressing a little bit. So I'm going to go 2 there. 3. Here's where this is borderline insane.
This is the insanity.
We go viral for the wrong reasons. Anyway, I have Villa at 3. I know. Look, I just love Unai Emery. I think he sets up a midfield. I love what he does. I think they got better in the transfer window. I don't love week 1 from Watkins, right? But it's a long season. We'll see what happens here. I just really like what they do, and I think they've got a really good nucleus. If they can stay healthy, I like their shots of top 4. 3 feels insane, and I think this is more about where I land with City. I think this is clearly a regression year for City. On top of all the points deduction stuff that's a possibility, I also think that this is the thinnest City squad we've ever seen. I think they are a couple injuries away from real issues. And I think if you look at City, the one way that they have consistently dropped off is when they can't get the ball consistently through Holland. And that happens when De Bruyne is out. And I think the probability that De Bruyne makes it through an entire season healthy is very, very low. So it feels insane, especially since this is a side that hasn't lost more than like 4 points after the new year in like fucking 15 years. So, but I'm going to stick with it. And that's my top 4.
Yeah, there's little chance that De Bruyne gets through a whole season without a soft muscle injury. About as much of the chances as of me watching an entire match and not coming up with 15 reasons why I hate Kevin De Bruyne. Like I've come to grips with the fact that like it used to be like I used to rate players at like the punch them in the face level. Like how much would I give to punch that guy in the face? Right. And there are so many of them out there in sports, and they're all over sports. Right. There's so many punchable faces. You know, I know on this podcast, we hear all the time on our Monday night podcast, you know, for Timuchin's, you know, just hatred for Gabriel Jesus. And I get it. He does have that look like, oh, if you ran into that guy, you just want to punch him in the head. I just feel like Kevin De Bruyne doesn't just look like the kid you want to punch in the face. He looks like the kid you want to like bully. He looks like a kid you want to pick on. He just looks like a kid who throws all of his toys out the pram and then yells at the people outside the pram to put his toys back inside the pram because he wants to play some.
Doesn't De Bruyne remind you of the kid when you were growing up and you guys were like playing like street basketball or whatever, and everyone was going like 70%, and there was one kid going like 100 and like just going too hard? Like that's De Bruyne.
And he was usually a redhead with red cheeks and sweat.
Yeah,
he was the kid who sweat more than everyone. Yeah. And like at some point he'd start like yelling, almost to the point where he'd get so mad he'd start crying, and that would just lead other kids to make fun of him.
Yeah.
And then he'd go home and everyone would be like, "He gonna cry on the couch, ain't he?" Like, yeah, we all know what's happening. His mom is coming back here. She's gonna yell at us. Like, this is And like then an hour later, like we're all gonna get fruit roll-ups and like go in the pool. Like it's just ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I'm with you there. I don't disagree. My only issue with Aston Villa is I don't know they finished top 4 because I feel like Unai Emery just loves himself a knockout competition. And if he thinks he has a shot at the Champions League, he's going to push him. And God forbid they don't make it out of the Champions League group stage and they parachute into the Europa, that motherfucker is just going to book his hotel room for the wherever that final is. Because
that is my only real reservation with them is how they manage multiple competitions. And
I do agree with you. I did like their moves. Let's go quickly on the teams getting relegated. Give me your 3.
Oh God, let me double check. I had let's see. I have Southampton. I have Forest as my kind of like outside shot in.
Yep.
And I have who was it? I do have.
So you have Ipswich, I think.
Oh yeah, that's right. I have Ipswich. I couldn't remember if it was Ipswich or Leicester. I have Ipswich. I'll stick with it.
I have Leicester finishing rock bottom. I saw nothing today that makes me think differently, and I honestly do believe they're going to have at least 1, if not 2, points deductions. And I think those points deductions, whether it's 6 points, 8 points, or if it's the maximum 10 they're talking, I don't know that side looks to me the type of side that can get out of it. Now, I respect Steve Cooper, but I also know that the Leicester owners fired a guy who won the fucking league at Leicester 5 matches into the next season. So I don't know they're going to give Steve Cooper a long leash if things aren't going well. And I think when you start the season -10, you can assume
I'd forgotten all about that. That is wild. I'd forgotten about that.
So that to me is a little bit of an issue. So I have Leicester finishing rock bottom. I have Southampton. I don't know about Southampton. We're going to talk about them in a minute when we talk about their match at 70% possession. If you have 70% possession against 10 men and you can't score, I'm not sure you're going to score with 11 against better teams. And to be fair, also, after Schär leaves, Newcastle were down all 4 of the starting defenders that helped them secure Champions League 2 years ago. They had 2 backup fullbacks, and Botman's out for the whole year or until January, and you had no Schär. So, I struggle with it where Southampton gets their goals and how Southampton will be able to stay up. I don't think Russell Martin is a great manager. And then my last one, pains me to actually say this because I love the manager. I love the uniform, to be honest. And at times I love the way they played since they've come into the Premier League. But I think this is Wolves. I think Wolves have hit they had the PSR issues that forced them to sell Kilman, which I think is probably one of the more underrated buys by West Ham. And we'll get to that in one of my kind of purchases of the window. I think Kilman is a huge loss for them. I think that losing Neto is an immense loss because though we forget how dynamic he can be when he's fully healthy, even when he comes back for the 3 weeks before he hurts himself again, he creates all the goals that get them. They still don't have a center forward who can score, and I don't know they have anyone on the outsides that can create. And their defense is getting weaker. It pains me to say it because I absolutely love Gary O'Neill and feel so bad for how bad he was done by Bournemouth and then how worse he was done by VAR last year. But I feel like these owners have set that side up.
You don't
to
think
potentially not be able to compete?
You don't think they're going to get enough goals through I look at the teams in this league and they've still got Sarabia and Podence Podence reminds me of Neto sometimes. You still got Cunha who can come in. Cunha's to me makes the most sense up top.
But they're starting the big Larson guy. It feels like they're trying to play Route 1 football. I still come back to it made no sense to me. Gary O'Neill just doesn't seem like he rates Sarabia because he's never really used him. Even last year at times, he was everyone was hurt. Hwang was hurt. Cunha was hurt. Neto was out, and Sarabia starting matches on the bench. And, I feel like they are this mix of team. And I don't know that they can defend their way to getting by either. And part of the reason I think they may struggle, I think they are going to struggle to score goals, and I think they're going to struggle at the beginning of the season, and they don't have the financial wherewithal to actually add to the side. And I question if they won't be the side that pulls the trigger too soon and actually gets rid of Gary O'Neill. So my shock one is I actually have Gary O'Neill as the first manager fired. And I don't believe he's the worst manager. I would fire Nuno today if I were Forrest.
Yeah.
Because he showed in one match, and we'll get to the kind of our recap when we do our around the ground, but he showed in one match to me all their frailties. They take a lead, they can't hold on to it, they give up a weak goal, they allow Bournemouth back into it, and by all accounts, if it isn't for a wonderful goal line clearance by I forget which, well, I think it was one of the 7 players on the Wolves team with the last name Gomes, had a goal line clearance, but Bournemouth really should have taken the lead late and won that game 2-1. So for me, I struggle with that. So who do you have as your first manager fired?
So ironically enough, Nuno is my first pick. You know, I think they sack him. I still think they get relegated. I think, I mean, I didn't love what they did. Was it last summer when they just went and bought like 9 fullbacks for no reason? Like it was legitimately like 8 or 9. It was crazy. Like I didn't love what they did there. I don't think like, you know, like if you're gonna have a side that's gonna scrap for points, like this is like the opposite of a Dyche signing. Like this is the one. Like this is the manager that's like Dyche is gonna do that, but he's never gonna progress you, like advance you past a certain level. I think Nuno has the ability to do some very interesting things offensively, but he's not the type of manager that's gonna dig into the trenches and dig out a draw when you need one, right? Like that's not what he does. So I think for me, he's the first manager out, and I still think I don't think it saves Forrest.
I think it would be the most classic Forrest thing ever is to watch Leicester just plummet, and then they fire Nuno, and then negotiate to get Steve Cooper in as manager, and it would just be outstanding. Because you know what, the people at Forest, they would be the happiest. The supporters would go crazy because they absolutely loved him, and they were distraught when they decided to let him go because they felt like it wasn't his fault that they bought him 37 fullbacks and no attacking players who could score a goal in their first year back in the Premier League. So who is your manager of the year?
Ooh, I think I put Orange Slot here. Like, I think I like that one just because I think like, I mean, obviously a real up and comer in the world of managing in football. And like, you know, like I think Liverpool got the inside track on a guy they thought they could be, could be here for another 10 years, like Klopp. I think he's come in and dealt really well with a very difficult situation, coming in behind an almost mythical manager. I think he came in, did a really nice job of settling in and like putting his own brand of football into a side who's played the same way for 10 years. So that can't be easy for either players or a manager. I think he's done a great job so far. We talked about the fact that like, you know, preseason, but one way or the other, we're still riding 6 out of 7 games with a clean sheet. And we haven't seen 6 clean sheets in like, it feels like 3 years. So like,
feels like since we had a title.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't disagree with that shout. I will say this. If I was picking City to win the league, I'd be like, oh, well, you could pick any manager who overachieved, and that might be Slot finishing second or you know, having a great first season. I do believe if Arsenal finishes the job, for the fact that Arteta has taken them from outside of Champions League, coming off of what it was like after Unai Emery and then following in the footsteps, obviously, of Arsene Wenger, really rebuilding the entire club from the ground up. I mean, people forget he jettisoned their 3 best players within a month of being at the club. He was like, I don't want Lacazette. I don't want Aubameyang. I'll play Nketiah. I'll play the kids. And he's built that up. You know, everyone gave Pochettino all this credit for like recognizing Harry Kane was a star and not sending him out on loan again and starting him. But like, that's ultimately what Arteta did with Saka. He built the entire team around a kid some people didn't think was ever physically going to be strong enough to be a leader, right? And God knows I've been critical of Arteta. And I still can be. And I don't know he's a fully fledged, tactical genius that people want to give him yet. But he is a good leader. And he has matured as a manager. And you can see it with the play on the pitch. Now, I think it comes when you don't have guys like hothead Tavares as your fullback and you have Odegaard in your midfield and not Xhaka. Helps things look a lot more stable and have better leadership when your captain is Martin Odegaard and not Granit Xhaka, who I think actually was a very good servant for Arsenal for a long time. And for a while, they've actually missed him. I think they'll give it to Arteta if he wins the league. It's his first time, major trophy, top club, and it's not like he took over Liverpool, who almost was in the title hunt last year, and you keep him in the top 4. He took over a team 5 years ago that was outside of Europe, and he's got them battling on all fronts. And to be honest, I'd argue that they are ahead of City right now in a talent standpoint and maybe even a tactics. And I think you have to get some credit for that. I will say, if I were going to give a slight possibility, and I know they had a poor performance in week 1, but I think they're going to have a strong rebound. I think the guy's a good manager. I think if West Ham finds themselves anywhere fighting for Europe off of the last 2 years with David Moyes, I think Julian Lopetegui has a shot, especially the way he kind of walked away from the Premier League with Wolves last year to come back in second year at West Ham, first year taking over from a dinosaur in Moyes, buy a bunch of players, and if he can get it to work and bed them in, he's a winner. I mean, people forget, like, he was the Spain manager favored to win the World Cup, and Real Madrid gave him the job. He then lost both jobs.
Can you imagine going from as a West Ham fan? That's got to feel so refreshing to go from like years of like 4-4-2 dinosaur long ball football to like this innovative, like you've got all these like young, exciting players. You still got Bowen in there. You got like, I just think it's got to feel so like refreshing to be a West Ham fan for once.
I think these are going to be easy because I'm pretty sure we have the same answers for all 3 of these questions. So let's just bang through these so we can get to the next topics that we're on. Golden Boot.
Oh, so this is a weird one. I have Son. I hate that pick now, but I'm going to stick.
You did?
Yep.
That's right. You had Son. I went with Haaland.
Yeah.
Fully healthy.
Yeah.
Playing for the team that feeds it through him. And to be honest, they need him to score goals more than ever before.
Yep.
So I think this is the year he may break his own records. I think Haaland is a shoo-in. Pretty sure we were same on this one. Best defense usually leads to best clean sheets. Usually the goalkeeper with the Golden Gloves.
Yep.
David Raya.
Yep.
And our player of the year, I know we were on the same page because when you are the best player on the best team that wins the Premier League, you normally win the prestigious award, and that goes to
Odegaard.
Thank you. And I know people will say Saka because of the numbers, but for me, Odegaard makes everything go. I think Rice could be a question. Rice is probably the answer of what put them over the top and changed everything for them. But I do believe the most important player at the club is Martin Odegaard. I think he makes everything go. And again, similar to what we've talked about, Saka has had some niggles and some injury issues. If he were to go down for any period of time, they are going to need leadership and quality. And as much as I think Havertz has proven me wrong, you wrong with his performances for Arsenal, I still feel like Gabriel Jesus is going to come good for them because he can poach and score goals, and he's a good sub, especially if he's your backup. And again, we've talked about this before. On his day, I believe Martinelli might be the single most talented player at the entire club. And he's the guy I'd want, except for he plays left wing, and we have 850 of them. And then we're leaving out Trossard. I mean, they're still being linked, and they're still being linked with like strikers. Like there's talk if the Tony deal falls through with Saudi Arabia that it's probably Arsenal that comes in for him. They're still saying Osimhen might end up there on loan.
And then Niketias is nice, dude. I love him as a player. Nobody he just kind of just does it. And whenever he plays, he scores. It's wild. Like
unbelievable. So I think we're all good there. Who is the signing of the season for you?
So for me, I went with the guy that I think has the highest ceiling and the ability to make the most impact on the side that picked him up. And so it was Smith Rowe, another Arsenal player.
Man, we are all over Arsenal today. I do love that signing. I went with Solanke because I do think it's exactly what they needed. I think the mistake last year was trying to rely on Richarlison. You and I are not Richarlison haters, though we love making fun about him. But we've always said if he was a guy on your team, you'd love him. And if he's a guy on your opponent, you hate him. He single-handedly kept Everton up with big goals and big performances and literally grabbed them, along with Pickford, and dragged them across the line that year. I don't think he is a terrible footballer. I just think he's got a bad mug. And I think sometimes when you're a Brazilian who doesn't look like you enjoy your football because you don't smile, it's like Anthony and him, right? It's like everything negative about Brazilian football is basically those two guys, and Lucas Paqueta betting on himself to get a yellow. But I think Solanke's skill sets just fit, and his system fit the process. I think Solanke has a really, really great chance of having a big year, potentially scoring 20 goals. Who is your potential flop of the season, or what signing just doesn't make any sense to you and you feel like this is just rooted in shite?
So this is off to a predictably great start, like all things when I say
I knew it was coming.
Flop. I went who's most likely to be a flop? Well, let's just pick a Manchester United attacking player because they all flop, right? So I went Xerxes, and he comes out.
Yeah.
He snags
scores a game winner at 85th minute. And it was a nice little finish, too, to be honest. Got to give him credit. I think I said his name as well during the podcast, and that was mainly because I couldn't think of anything at that point, so I just started reiterating what you were saying, which is probably the dumbest decision I made all day.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm going to amend that now. I am changing it, but I feel like you can when a signing has occurred since. And I'm going to today's signing, and I don't even think it's close.
Ooh.
I think João Felix will be the biggest bust, the biggest flop. Leave it to Chelsea. Wait, they bought Lukaku 3 times and he flopped all 3 times.
I was going to say,
I think we can basically roll this thing up. Like, I honestly think there's a better chance that Chelsea finds value in Danny Drinkwater than what they just paid for João Felix. Like, I don't think he is anywhere near the $126 million player people made him out to be. I think he has a 2-cent head, and I don't think at a club that has turmoil, you can make it with a 2-cent head. And I don't think he has the physical attributes to be a massive success in the Premier League unless he was playing literally in like a Jurgen Klopp false 9, playing almost like a Bobby guy that brings players in and drops deep and creates. And we always talked about how his skill sets were so talented on the ball and in small spaces. Yep. This makes no sense whatsoever. This looks like George Mendes just trying to get his player another big payday, himself a big commission. Where does João Felix fit at Chelsea?
I don't know how you have the stones to do this if you're Chelsea. Like, have you not, like, after you've lost your ass repeatedly on Lukaku, like, you're like, oh, let's go. You know what we should do? We should buy a player that didn't work out the first time. I don't understand how you possibly have the confidence to do that.
Just blows my mind. So any other, like, around the ground, just kind of like, and let's just kind of hit them, even just throw them out, like signings that you love, just the player's name, the club that he went to.
I like the Onana signing. I wish that he came to Liverpool. I just think that he's a big-bodied, able, true 6 that can do things moving forward too, like a modern 6 should. I'm trying to think who else, man. Who else jumps out at me? I liked that one. The Brazilian kid that City picked up is nice, but I mean, we knew that
Savio.
He looks good. Like, he looks really good.
I mean, he hits the ground running. You're like, oh, great. Look, they found another Brazilian winger.
You're like,
find a way in for 20 million. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
I'd say like a couple I had. I thought Palace did good business with the Japanese international winger Kamada. I think he's a nice player. I think Ismail Sarr will turn out to be a really good player.
Yeah.
You know, I just worry about Palace. Like some of us were really bullish about Palace being a team that might fight for Europe, but now like 2 injuries at City, and all the rumors are that they're going to go in for Eze, and he's going to go to City because he wants the big payday. You know, Mark Guy might be off. Now there's talk that even Fulham is looking at Joachim Anderson. Like it looks like Crystal Palace may be absolutely pegged with their players, and it's just too bad because, you know, I will tell you this. I watched that match, the Brentford Palace match, and we'll talk about that when we do our VAR review in a second. But I got to tell you, man, we can talk about Eze all we want. We can talk about how good Elise is. Anyone who watches football and doesn't watch Adam Wharton the entire time he's on the pitch.
Yeah, dude, that guy's
dude is so fucking good. He drifts, he glides, he makes every pass. And as the second half came on, he started to move into attacking positions, and I started saying, like, I didn't even know this dude had these skills. Like, he might be England's most complete box-to-box midfielder outside of Bellingham, and Bellingham might be the best player in the world.
My favorite thing about him is he looks like a kid you're kicking off the front steps of like the grocery store, telling him he can't skate there. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like it's so good.
Well, and the fact that they bought him for 20 million from a championship side that was in a relegation battle, like this is what drives me nuts about Liverpool, because it's the player Liverpool needs.
Yeah.
You could build your whole midfield around him, and you could have had him last January for 20 million. And instead, you'll have some Liverpool supporter wanting you to pay 125 million, knowing we won't ever pay that much money, but you can't resell a player. So I love the Wharton kid. Thought that was another one, even though I'll give him almost like a kudos on that. Another one I love. I liked all of what West Ham did. Somerville, Guido Sanchez, Max Kilman. I said it earlier. I think he might end up being one of the steals. And that the center back they got from France, Todibo. Like, and this is where I give Lopetegui credit. He didn't start any of the signings except for Guido Sanchez. And when they asked him after the match, he was like, none of them were ready to start this match. They need to start when they're ready to succeed. Don't worry, they're all starters. But the beauty was like, he made sure, and that's why I kind of give them a little bit of a pass. And I hate giving professionals a pass for mailing it in. But if you're Dominic Soufal, right, and you know Wan-Bissaka is coming for your job, like in a week or two, he has your job. And you're, you know, Antonio up top, or, you know, the left winger, like these players know they're not fighting for their spot. They've already been replaced. It's just a matter of time when that happens. I can understand a little bit of a hangover, and like, because they are real people. So I think you judge West Ham like after the international break. That'll be really interesting. I like their signings a lot. I love the Onana shout. One that I think will turn out to be an absolute stud is I do think the casualty of PSR from Newcastle, Minta, the winger who never made an appearance,
really good.
Looked really good, had an assist for Brighton. I think he had 4 goals and 4 assists in the preseason. He was one of those fantasy highlights.
That dude can fly.
You know what's crazy to me, though? You know what's crazy? He plays right wing. Do you know where he played last year on loan? Feyenoord.
Oh, yeah, that's
Why aren't
right.
we in?
That's
Why
right.
weren't we in? Why were we focused on getting Anthony Gordon to piss off Everton fans instead of getting a guy for 35 million at Liverpool that could have been an understudy? Now, maybe we got 2 or 3 more years to mow, but like to me, now maybe the manager said he's really, really good, but that's not what I want. I want Bakayoko from PSV, or I want, you know, the Georgian young kid on the left and Diaz on the right. Like whatever the big plans
there's
is.
so many of those. Like I always wondered, like, why, like the Dutch left back for Villa, Matson, the former Chelsea kid.
Yeah.
Perfect. perfect modern day left back. He's Dutch. Like, he wasn't crazy expensive. Like, there's a lot of those. Like, we're like, all right, I know that we're data driven, but like, where did this not come out on the right spreadsheet? Because can I resend it for you? Like,
a couple other ones I really do like. I did like, and I know he had a bad weekend. We're going to talk about him. He embarrassed himself, but I think Southampton signing a Premier League player with 8 goals in 14 games for a crappy team like Sheffield United for cheap money, that Ben Burriton Diaz, that's a good signing for Southampton.
Yeah.
He will score goals. He's a very talented footballer. And then I have a question mark on this, because this could literally end up being one of the signings of the year or one of the flops of the year, and it has more to do with the club, and that's Pedro Neto, because he sits on the bench all game yesterday. They bring him in the game, and he literally should have scored with the first touch he had in the game.
Yeah.
He's like running at the back post, and you're like, oh my God, he's going to score this goal. And he's just going to like turn around and just do what Neto does. He's going to score 4 or 5 world-class goals. The whole question with Neto is can he stay healthy? Because if he does, I think he's literally the second best player probably on Chelsea's side outside of Cole Palmer if he's healthy, which would be really, really interesting. And it's not João Felix, as you can imagine, seeing that I said he'd be the flop of the year. Any other head scratchers for you, ones that you question, ones that you think just probably don't have a lot of a chance to succeed?
Oh, man, nothing that pops out off the top of my head. I think you could probably do this. You could probably go down the lineup and do this legitimately for 70% of Chelsea's purchases. Like, I think it's that high. Like, I think 3 of 10 probably makes sense. Like, it's just not only a volume thing. It just there's no, like, there doesn't seem to be like a cohesive like theme in what they're looking for tactically either. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're like not even getting guys that like play the same system. So I don't know. It's weird. Dude.
Yeah, there weren't a lot. I mean, there aren't a lot of head scratchers in my opinion. I have a couple. I already mentioned João Felix. I don't question this signing. I more or less question like whether it has any chance of working, because I think it's been proven at this point that Cameron Archer isn't a Premier League goal scorer, that he's not a center forward.
Yeah.
Like, he had his time at Villa. He was the up-and-coming star. They sent him to Sheffield United. He couldn't hold down a starting spot. They get relegated because they don't score enough goals. He goes to Southampton. Like, to me, that seems like a stretch for me. Not the way I would have spent it. I hope the Bournemouth striker, who is their new record signing, the Brazilian Evangelison, I genuinely really hope it works out for him. I really hope they were going to sign Tammy Abraham, mainly because I like watching Tammy Abraham play, and I like having Tammy Abraham on my fantasy team, to be totally honest, because all the guy does is score goals and get transferred to other clubs, which probably means he's got his own issues in training. So I question whether or not he'll be able to bet in quick enough and whether or not he'll be able to get Bournemouth those goals they need, because that could be the real struggle for them. And lastly, this one hits home. But I think the most questionable signing of the entire summer is Brentford spending $27 million plus $8 million in add-ons for Fabio Carvalho. And I know there's a huge talent there, but I think we saw it he was put on almost to give him a run out, to let the home crowd clap him and wave to the crowd, and was just told to go out there and do a job. And instead of trying to take the ball to the corner, he decided to almost pick up a yellow card for berating a referee over a bad call on getting a corner kick that they weren't even going to take. They were trying to kill time. I just feel like he has immense talent and a 2-cent head, and I don't think that ever changes. He's not Mario Balotelli, but he's got issues.
And he's also he's also not like system resilient. Like he has to be in a like in a system that really utilizes an attacking mid where he's allowed to go central. Like, so it's like a combination of just the mentality and the fact that you have to really put him in a spot on the pitch for him to like do what he needs to do.
And I hope it works out. I genuinely do. I hope, because he's got all the talent in the world. I'd love to see it happen for him. think there's sell-on clauses, there's buyback clauses, so it could also help Liverpool, which is near and dear to our hearts. I just feel like it's so funny. I spent all summer listening to everyone rave about how great he was, even though he looked like a jerk on the pitch the entire summer. The manager kept talking about his attitude, kept coaching him up like he had an attitude. And then the kid goes to the podium and says, well, I had a great meeting with the manager. He thinks I'm a winger. I told him I think I'm a 10. Like, he should have never put the jersey on after that. They should have sold him before he got – like, he should have got the Sacco treatment, to be honest.
It's like a kid that doesn't get it. You know what I mean? Like, just
never going to get it.
Yeah.
So, speaking of not getting it, let's go and talk a little bit about the VAR week in review. Sad thing is, we could fill this program up and talk about poor decisions throughout the weekend. I do think there are 3 or 4 glaring ones that we can talk about, some of which I think are bad calls, some of which I think are poor officiating, and some of which I do think is genuinely kind of like a happen circumstance mistake. So let's start with maybe the most egregious talking point of the whole weekend, which occurs in the Southampton-Newcastle match. So first and foremost, Paul, I need you to take the emotional side of the dive out of it. Letter of the law, if you put your head on another player's head, even slightly and lean forward, there is a chance you're getting sent off. So are you condoning Fabian Schär, a guy who has played over 200 Premier League starts, doing that on opening day weekend, taking out what Diaz did?
I'm not condoning it. I think, to me, both players it's a coming together of 2 players, and one player makes a meal of it, mainly because he's an Englishman masquerading as a Chilean. Any guy named Ben who rolls with 3 names ending in Diaz, like, I have questionable thoughts about it anyway. I just really hate it. I really just hate it in general. Like, I thought it's such a gross thing because, like, I think that we're really stretching the fucking definition of violent conduct here, right? Like, 100%. if you look at this, like, at the end of the day, that's what we're getting a straight red for, is violent conduct. And it is 2 players going at it. They're both jawing. And I think I'd have to watch it back, but I think Diaz actually initiates, he's the one that steps up first.
He walks forward,
yeah,
but Schär puts his head on his head, and then Schär leans in. And from that moment, Spaniard goes literally like yard sale.
Schär's got to be smarter there, but, like, also, like, why? Like, that's what I hate about it. Like, why does he have to be? Like, he shouldn't have to be. Like, you know, like, they're both having an emotional moment. I just hate it. I hated all of it. I thought it was gross. Like, never a red for me.
Graham Sano was interesting this morning on one of the talk shows over in England. He went off. He lost his mind.
Yeah.
Like, lost. And his argument was VAR is here to get mistakes and correct them.
Yep.
So why wasn't, in his mind, he feels the referee should have been sent to the monitor to look at the incident, should have come back and given Schär a yellow card.
I don't know that it would have changed if he went to the monitor.
Right. But he felt he should have went to the monitor and came back and had the authority to give Diaz a red for basically the simulation and for cheating the game, for trying to send off another player. Because
I like it. It's not going to happen.
That's how you would actually eradicate guys from doing this. Send the guy off who makes a meal of it. I just see both sides, because then
can you do that though? Like, it would have been I would have felt like, if anything, it's a yellow. Can you get a straight red for a dive?
You couldn't. And his point is this is in his mind what's wrong with the video refereeing is like, the point is it shouldn't be about letter of the law, because they were arguing, but by the rule, he should be sent off. So I think we're both on this one. Maybe we need to rewrite a little bit of the violent conduct rules.
Right.
Maybe we need to have, I almost wonder if, like, I know it sounds stupid, but, like, you review every single goal line. You review every goal for errors in buildup, handballs. Why isn't something as influential as why isn't every red card just reviewed
Right.
by VAR
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
for validity? To me, that would be an easy answer, but easy answers normally aren't the right way to go when it comes to these morons and buffoons. So we'll take that one out of the equation. Let's fast forward over to Villa. Let's talk about the Matty Cash penalty decision to award a penalty there. For me, I hate doing this, but I listened to Goldbridge this morning talk about this, and he was so spot on and right. Ultimately, if you're telling Matty Cash not to make that challenge in that spot, if you're telling Matty Cash what he did is wrong, then you're telling him not to make the challenge.
Right.
If he doesn't make that challenge, the other team scores.
Right.
Where the fuck is this game gone?
Yeah.
How is that a penalty ever?
I don't disagree. I think the bottom line is the reality of the situation with VAR is when you have bang plays that are going to look 50-50 and they get called one way on the field, if they're even within the spectrum of being close, it's not getting overturned. And that's, I think, the bottom line. I think you could ask 10 people, neutral fans, whether that was a penalty, and you'd get 5 that say it was and 5 that said it wasn't. I really do. I think it's that close. Like, for me, it's not. I don't like it because I want to see, I'm with everybody else. Like, I think we're taking goals out of the game unnecessarily in the sport. And I'm firmly a believer of you should be if it's not a penalty at midfield, it shouldn't be a penalty in the box. And I think we should play the game and not expect everything that has contact for that to be a penalty. So for me, I'd like to see more physicality in the game, especially in the box, and have more leeway there. But I just genuinely think if you ask 10 people, you're going to get 5 that say it is and 5 that isn't. In those situations, you're never getting that overturned.
I definitely agree. And maybe the least controversial VAR decision and or interaction of the weekend came in the Palace-Brentford match when Palace's opening goal was wiped away by an advertent whistle. So, where are you on VAR's position in this? And is this a failure of the rules as much as the interpretation of violent conduct when they can't do anything about it based on when the whistle?
Yeah, I was going to go back to So's argument about the entire point of VAR is to correct clear and obvious errors, right? If we have a whistle and it's a clear and obvious error that impacts that, why are we not going back and fixing it? I mean, other than the fact that we have a million fantasy owners out there just absolutely losing their mind on that play.
I wasn't one of those because I decided to sell him out of my team when I thought he might go to City and play, once every 8 games in Pep Roulette. Right. He left my team, so I was one who was kind of like, well, that's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
That being said, I'll do 2 things here. 1, egregious call. Huge mistake. Yep. I put a lot of it on PGMOL because they told all these refs to stop all this battling in the box and be more diligent about defenders holding and offensive players creating picks and screens, right? Steal basketball term. They want the blocking off. You know what they want? They want the set play coach. They want the set piece coaches to play a lot less of a role. Because it's we used to play this game and we put this guy here and everyone man marked and a couple guys would run around and every once in a while, John Barnes would out jump everyone and we get a header for a goal. Right? Now it's there is an art behind it. Yep. There are 3 players blocking off the defender on Virgil van Dijk every time Liverpool breaks in the box. We do it. Other teams do it. I do think the ref made the first mistake, just like Flecken did, to assume that Eze was crossing that ball. Right. He wasn't even looking at the kick. He's looking at the play. Now, in the back of his mind is, I'm supposed to pay attention to all these fouls. He sees it coming together. I personally believe that Hughes, the little albino of himself, the little Q-tip that he is, he just reminds me of Whitey from Me, Myself, and Irene. Like, I just think he's going to come out on the, like, any moment he's coming out with the shotgun, just shoot him down right at the end, like right at the end of the movie. And you're like, yeah, Whitey. But yeah, that's Will Hughes. Can you imagine what it must have been like being Will Hughes growing up in England? Oof. I think it's a foul against Hughes, not on Hughes.
Yeah, I thought the call was completely outrageous in general. Like, it just was wrong. Like,
then the guy takes the keeper on, calls out the keeper, gets the inside of the post, puts it in the net, and they go to VAR and actually determine that the whistle occurred before the ball went in the net, and therefore they can't do anything about it.
Shambles. Yep.
One thing I do want to point out, Tierney, Oliver, Taylor, right? Those guys, they hide behind these mistakes. They hide behind mistakes. They hide behind calls. Supposedly, the referee addressed the entire Crystal Palace team and Eze at completion of the game, admitting his mistake, and said that if they would allow him to, he would go to the media and do it. But the league won't let him acknowledge it publicly. I did not know this because I was watching and I was like, who is this guy? Did you know that he was the highest rated English official in all 5 divisions over the last 5 seasons?
Wow.
He has just become, for the first time ever, a full-time EPL referee, will not be refereeing in the lower leagues. I give him credit for acknowledging a mistake in his big moment.
Yeah, but isn't that all? Like, look, we know this job is hard, right? We know it's hard, but that's all we want. And I think that what bothers football fans is not only the lack of transparency, but the lack of accountability, right? So, like, for me, that's a big deal. Like, to have a ref come out, and I got to imagine as a player that has to be a big deal, right? I mean, I think that would feel like, I love that. Like, I think the game needs more of that. Long may it continue, and hopefully he comes out and smashes it the rest of the year.
Well, that's my hope. My hope is that other Premier League teams and players will give him some respect for admitting his mistake. And I will say, I'm not sure I've ever heard a player be classier than Eze was post-match, where he's like, hey, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes. He told me it was a mistake. What can I do other than accept his apology? I was like, oh, thank you. Because if that were Bruno Fernandes, we'd be hearing about the goal and the points and everything out throughout the season. It did cost Crystal Palace what could be a very, very important point, though, if they are able to push themselves in to those rounds. So let's take a quick look here as we wrap things up at the fixtures of the weekend. We're not going to talk about every match all week long, all year long, but we'll pick out a few of them. I do want to touch base on the City-Chelsea match because, it's big teams. It's a potential, title contender in City. Was the marquee matchup of the weekend. For you, we didn't do this in the VAR review because I don't believe by the letter of the law and today's rules, the Kovacic play can be called a handball anymore based on how they changed it. Last year and the year before, that's a handball, probably against every team but City. Where did you stand on that play when you saw it? Do you think it had a major impact on the outcome of the game, or would it have really mattered even if Chelsea leveled at that point at 1-1? Would City had still gone down and got their goal if they needed it?
Yeah, I just feel like City probably would have gone and gotten one eventually. But, you look at, they had a call. They didn't get a pen before halftime. It could have been a pen. So, you just – these things are razor thin on margins. But I thought on the run of play, on the whole, I thought City just looked like a tier above, which is not surprising when you have a squad of 56 players that get – rotated through laundry. So your best
midfielder was sitting on a tarmac in Madrid.
I just think City looked a level above, but to me, I think and I actually like the change in the handball rule.
No, I agree. And I don't think it should have been called a handball. I don't think there's anything Kovacic can do in that spot.
Right.
But if it were against us, we would have been screaming bloody murder that it should have been a handball and that it was conspiracy and how much are the, Saudis paying to give this. And it's just this, it is funny how it always feels like the pendulum shifts to City. And it's weird because you'd think the court of public opinion would be against City.
Yeah, sure.
Yet it's almost like they get the benefit of the doubt on the front end because everybody knows they feel like everyone's coming to give it to them on the back end. It's like I don't understand where that part of it is. So touch on the City match. Do you believe Maresca played that midfield because it was City and he was trying to be extra defensive? Or do you think the Caicedo, Enzo, Lavia midfield is what Maresca believes is the best three of his 855 players? Because that to me seems like 3 sixes.
I can't imagine that you're gonna play. I can't imagine you're gonna play Enzo as an attacking 8 or a 10. Do you know what I mean? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Like I think you're probably in the season's long enough. You're probably going to rotate those two holding mids. I imagine Enzo's going to go into those holding mids. And I imagine you've got to see – I mean, at some point you're probably going to see like what a Dewsbury Hall in there, I would imagine. Like that would –
I'd like to believe you'll see Dewsbury Hall. I also think you'll probably see them – I think they'll probably play a 4-2-3-1 at some point, and they'll start to play – I think what the big problem is, we've talked about Jackson. He's just a fraud. He's not a striker. He's not a winger. He's just – and he is super young, and there's talent. You can see some talent, but he's got no brain. It's just, I hate to say it, he just looks like a Spanish player that's never going to make it in the Premier League because it just takes you to be too technically on at all moments to be great in the Premier League. And the fact that he allowed himself to drift off sides in that position, knowing that Palmer was about to take that shot, and then he slots it home and he's offsides, and he's offsides by inches, which makes it even worse. It's not like he's 1.5 feet offsides. Like he's this much. I think eventually they end up playing with like Mudryk on the right, Palmer on the left, or Palmer on the right, Mudryk on the left, and maybe like João Felix and Nkunku through the middle and some false 9-10 attacking play.
Yeah, I was wondering if they're going to go back to the João Felix false 9 that they did when he was there originally.
And they might, and play Nkunku behind him in the 10 hole and play somebody else on the wing. It's going to be interesting. I don't feel great for them. I don't know that it's going to work out well. It's funny when you buy 255 players and the only thing you needed was an improvement in keeper and an improvement at number 9, and you didn't fucking buy one. Long live Todd Bowley. Let's talk quickly on the shite across town. Everton, they lay the egg. They lose 3-0 to Brighton. Everton had some opportunities early in the match to score. Calvert-Lewin, wasted a gilt-edged chance. Everton's the type of team that if you don't score your chances early, especially at home, and a nervy Goodison, that's not going to bode well. Is this ultimately, once again, more about Everton still teetering on that level of who are we, what do we do? Or does it really speak more about if you keep rolling out 37-year-old fullbacks in this league, you will get performances of 37-year-old fullbacks?
Well, yeah, that was clearly like the straightest red that you'll ever see in your life. But I think it's a combination of things. Like I think that I just don't know how this Everton side and this has been I feel like this has been the 5-year conversation on them, where the goals come from, right? I think everyone sees Calvert-Lewin as a certified legitimate number 9, and that's fine. But if you're essentially playing two rows of back fours behind it with really Decore is the only support, and a team like Brighton, who is going to push the pace, you're not going to be able to get Harrison and McNeil in positions to support that. And I just think that they're going to really struggle. Their identity has been wrapped around how they defend for so long that if they continue to play football on the back foot, there's no way that you can even get Calvert-Lewin in a position to consistently poach goals. And I think that's just going to be the issue with them. And I think it's kind of a perfect storm because I think Brighton actually matches up really well with them just in general, what they do.
Yeah, I do agree. And I will say, I was going to ask you, and I'll give my answer first, then you can give yours, and we'll wrap this thing up here on the hour. But I was going to ask next, if you looked at this whole thing, who was the most impressive performance of the weekend? And I'd argue it was Brighton. And it's not even the fact that they won 3-0 at Goodison. They could have won 5 or 6, to be honest. They had more opportunities. And it's not the opponent they played. But Brighton was a shell of themselves last year. They couldn't defend. They couldn't keep a clean sheet. They made mistakes all over the pitch. And clearly the manager fell out with management, some of his players. And that was evident when, he was linked with every big job and he got the luxury of coaching Mason Greenwood next, which basically is like catching the short straw or picking up the short bus. It's nothing good that comes out of it because you can't win. You defend the player who scores 2 goals, and they're like, you like rapists. You don't defend the players, and they're like, you're at Marseille. Like, this is a club who their own fans stormed the pitch during training to attack their players. So I don't even know where you take it from there, other than De Zerbi probably firing down 18, Pall Malls in every training session. But to me, this Brighton side, they look invigorated. They've made some really, really smart signings the last couple windows. I think Adinga's a big signing. I think Minta's a good signing. Matoma looked back to top form. Yep. When are we going to talk about the fact that as good as João Pedro is, Danny Welbeck's still the best striker at the club because he just scores fucking goals? This team is really good, and I think people forget how close Brighton were to making the big step. It was 2 years ago. They were the Villa. They were everyone's soup du jour to crash the Champions League. And I think Brighton have a chance this season under this young, progressive manager to make a real big step forward. And it looks like he's got a good mix of young and old. And he's still got Milner. He's still got, he's got players there that bring some experience. So for me, it was Brighton probably the most impressive. If you look at all these fixtures, what do you think was the most impressive, either performance, result? What stood out to you the most?
I actually really like that shout. I mean, I was big on the Villa performance, but I really like that shout. I mean, if you look at this Brighton side, this is a Brighton side that had coming off the bench Gilmore, Adingra, and we're not even talking about Belaba, who came bursting on the scene last year as a teenage sensation. So I think not only do they just have a pretty decent lineup, I do worry about that back four still, but if they play offensively like they did, it's not going to be an issue. 38-year-old James Milner, I don't know how long that's going to happen out there. Starting next to a dude 14 years younger than him. So just unbelievable. I think the attack, they've got they're front loaded, right? Their front four is what's going to load them up, but they've got some really, really nice things coming off the bench. Well, let's see what this Menta injury looks like. He was pulled at halftime, but I mean, damn if that was an exciting 45 minutes from him.
It was concussion protocol, so it sounds like they didn't have a choice.
Okay.
And they were doing the due diligence. So, but he has to wait out 6 days without training because he did test positive. So he probably doesn't make it next weekend, I don't think. And I think you wouldn't want to rush him back. I think you have a good shout with Villa. I thought it was a good performance, especially to get points on the road. People forget Villa, I think they lost 4 of their last 5 and only had 1 win in their last 8. So they wanted to get that bad taste out of their mouth. You mentioned how Watkins didn't have the greatest performance. I thought McGinn was really good. It's just such a kick in the nuts to a West Ham supporter. You spend all summer trying to buy Duran, literally. You tried to buy the player. He agrees to come and signs on personal terms. The deal falls through. You buy a 36-year-old freaking dude with no teeth from Germany, and then that dude turns around and scores the game winner on your pitch. That is the most West Ham thing of all time. That's got to be very, very difficult, almost as difficult as losing to a guy from MLS that nobody thinks has any talent. But, hey, the guy can play football. I like Duran, actually. I think he's a good player. I just don't think he's a top-level number 9 striker in the Premier League. But if I were Aston Villa, I wouldn't be selling him because I think he gives them a lot of options. I think Villa was very good. I think Brighton was very good. And I think you'd be remiss not to say that Liverpool has to be happy to get 3 points, and Man United has to be happy to get 3 points. just because of all the turmoil and how the season went. They do have a shit ton of injuries, turmoil in players, and a manager that half the players want and half the players want out. That can't be easy. So it pains me to give the scum any credit here, but I do think Man United deserves some credit for keeping a clean sheet with a makeshift team and scoring a game winner late.
I do think we need to tip a cap a little bit to Newcastle too. I mean, I know it's Southampton,
Yeah.
but that was a hell of a defensive performance in the last 30 minutes of that match.
Fact that they gave up 70% possession and won a match 1-0.
Yeah.
I think bodes well for what Eddie Howe was saying, which was we believe we're back because we're going to defend like we did 2 years ago. And now we're going to be able to score the goals that we couldn't at that point. So it's going to be really interesting to see. As always, we're going to get out of here with the same ask as always. Please, if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead, give the page a subscription, hit the little bell. As Tamichen would say, hit all the thumbs and ups and likes and shares. Don't hit that one with the thumb down. Don't forget to comment. Tune in every single week. Watch all of our shows. And as always, for myself and Bickler, we appreciate you tuning in to the American Scouser TV's Premier League show, Match Week 1. We'll be back next week taking a look at all of Match Week 2 and its glory. And I'm sure there'll be a couple of VAR decisions for us to rip apart. Have a great week, everyone. Talk to you soon.